number 10 spot, we have Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was a scientist that is known for creating the elixir of life, an elixir that, yes, would keep you living for as long as you would like. It was called Dippel's oil. He tried to trade the elixir for Frankenstein's castle once. Obviously, the owners didn't fall for it. Or at least they didn't believe in its worth. But I bet you're wondering, why was he thought to be so evil? Well, probably because he used to experiment on himself and dead bodies. And he claimed that he even transferred the soul of one body to another, even though no one could ever confirm this as the bodies were, well, deceased. He also claimed to have a way of releasing demons from bodies. Man, I wonder if that's documented anywhere. We can all use an exercise for releasing demons, you know what I mean? In our number 9 spot, we have Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons is known for being a rocket scientist, but also a follower of the occultist Aleister Crowley. He is believed to be someone who was in direct contact with the devil and did experiments, aka spells, on himself. He was the reason for the advancement of liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. He was unable to continue being a scientist when news of his occult ways became public knowledge. Apparently, he worked with the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, to summon the god Babylon to Earth. He died in an at-home explosion from an experiment that he was doing. Jack is a tricky one because obviously everyone was so Christian and Catholic back then that they would have thought him to be evil, but I don't know, I really wonder if this is one of those cases where, they were wrong and maybe he was just a nice guy. I don't know. In our number 8 spot, we have the Tuskegee scientists. The scientists that participated in this experiment are legit pure evil. There was a study done called the Tuskegee study where 600 African American males, 399 who were suffering with syphilis and 201 who weren't, and these men were being tricked into thinking that they were being treated for the illness, when really they were dying off, except the ones that didn't have it, of course. They were the success stories, of course. But what was the purpose of this? Well, to study their corpses. They couldn't have thought to just ask them if they could study their bodies once they die. Why did this happen, and even for as long as it did, which was 40 years, from 1932 to 1972? So evil. Reparations were eventually paid to the victims of the study, but nothing could make up for the horrible feeling they must have felt from going through that experience. In our number 7 spot, we have Dr. Sigmund Rascher. This is a scientist that needed to be mentioned because of how evil he was. However, it is unclear as to whether he experimented on himself at all throughout his life. Rascher is considered one of the most evil scientists in the world from World War II. He worked at a camp and apparently experimented on 300 unwilling people in high-altitude freezing experiments. Victims were locked in a pressure chamber where the altitude was being continuously adjusted, and they would feel as if they were falling out of a plane. He would also place them in freezing environments naked to perform tests. Of course, this led to many deaths. He was asked to do this on monkeys but demanded humans. Clearly a very sick and awful man. In our number 6 spot, we have Shiro Ishii. There is a man that is known as Surgeon General Shiro Ishii, and he was a scientist and medical officer for the Japanese Imperial Army. In fact, he led the biological warfare unit that is known as 731. He's also known for being just plain evil, as he would experiment on Chinese prisoners and regular civilians. He used biological weapons that is said to have caused tens of thousands of deaths, including the bubonic plague, cholera, and anthrax. He would also conduct other evil experiments on his patients, including forced and simulated hypothermia. It is unclear if he experimented on himself, as I'm sure he wouldn't have given himself the bubonic plague, but it is clear that he was very, very evil. In our number 5 spot, we have Max Joseph von Pettenkofer. Max was a scientist that wasn't so much evil as he was seemingly insane, as he did an extremely risky experiment on himself. Apparently in 1892, he wanted to disprove the theory that cholera bacteria alone known, was the cause of the disease. In the presence of witnesses, Max swallowed some broth with a large dose of cholera bacteria. He apparently also consumed some sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acids in his stomach after it was suggested that the acid could kill the bacteria. Apparently he suffered only minor symptoms, and what he did experience, he says, wasn't due to the bacteria. To me, he just sounds like he was either a little insane or just so sure of himself that it wasn't a risk at all. And even then, I would say to be that sure of yourself, to take that big of a risk, means you have to be a little insane. In our number 2 spot, we have Peter Neubauer. In the 60s and 70s, a secret experiment was done, led by a scientist by the name of Peter Neubauer, that separated twins and triplets from each other, and they were adopted as singles. Apparently, this experiment was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and the purpose of this experiment is still unclear. To separate living humans from their family, all for the sake of science, is truly just evil in my opinion. The experiment was discovered in the 80s after 3 identical brothers accidentally found each other. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like to be them. I suppose this experiment isn't as horrible as some of the other ones we have listed today, but it still is terribly sad to think about all of these people, missing out on growing up with their brothers and sisters. It is unclear whether Peter's decision to lead this was part of his job and therefore through slight force, as it was being funded by a big organization, or whether he pushed for this to be done. In our number 1 spot, we have Vladimir Demikov. So this is, in my personal opinion, one of the most evil scientists, but honestly there's so many evil ones on this list that it's really hard to say who should take first. So I'm giving it to Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir is a Soviet scientist that is known for performing the evil act of beheading many dogs and then re-sewing them onto other dogs' bodies. He did this for 15 years. Why? Oh, because apparently he was bored. Apparently, he was known to experiment on himself, and also he pioneered organ transplants, which is just so hard to digest that he could have been the founder of something that has done so much good for the world, while on the other hand, he committed unthinkable evil acts. Life is so strange.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Stubbins Firth. Okay, this is one of the craziest science projects I've ever heard of in my entire life. Ugh, so gross. Stubbins Firth, a researcher from Pennsylvania in the late 1700s. First of all, as you can probably guess, the 1700s. Methods back then, they got a little messy from time to time, sure. A lot of firsts in the medical science world back then. Firth was a doctor in training at the time, and he decided to prove to the world that yellow fever was not contagious. Yeah, imagine if you had Twitter. Firth would surgically insert vomit from patients with yellow fever into his own body. He would put it in wounds all over his face, his eyes. He was trying to get it. He was going the extra mile, all in the name of medical research. Thanks, Firth. So gross. Even urine and saliva, anything DNA-wise, anything gross, just pour it in. That's it, all over. Firth, to our surprise, did not get sick. Yeah, he was proud of that one too. He told everybody this new revelation. We look back now though and realize Firth just sampled late-stage patients this entire time. So they were further along, much further than the contagious period. Yeah, no one really knew. So basically, he volunteered to dump all over his Yeah, history is so gross. Science as well. Gets nasty. Number 9, Robert Liston. In the early 19th century, crowds would gather. They would gather to watch Dr. Robert Liston work. Yeah, he was known as the fastest knife in the West. I know, how many red flags can you find already in this one? A crowd, a fast surgery, what? What's going on? This was a time before anesthesia had been developed, so you wanted things wrapped up quickly, pun intended. He would have you amputated and sutured in 3 minutes or less. Nice. 1 in 10 would pass away, but this was a time where those were good odds, until it wasn't. Robert attempted to beat any record previously held that during a surgery, he accidentally cut off his assistant's fingers by accident, as well as the, patient's leg. But wait, it gets worse. Yeah, when he was swinging away, he also accidentally hit somebody else watching. Remember how I said crowds would gather, the old surgery crowd? Yeah, this is why you don't stand close. It's kind of like crump battles, You can't get too close. Disaster is waiting in there. You don't want to get smoked with a timberland. I'm glad surgeons are taking their time now. I'm also glad no surgeons are trying new experiments at a record time. That's also nice too. Number 7, Jose Delgado. Okay, we're talking mind control now, so I'll give you a moment to put on your tinfoil hats. In the early 1900s, Jose Delgado graduated from the University of Madrid. He even lands a professorship at Yale University. Guy's killing it, but his mind was focused on others' minds. He was committed to mind control. His go-to method was these implants, like electrode implants with wires. He first used it with primates, as you could have guessed, horrible classic. He would use a remote control to make them do certain moves, even moving on to mind controlling a bull. Yeah, he got in the ring with said mind controlled bull, but then oddly enough, the bull was calm. Weird. Almost like there's an implant in his brain and he's confused and doesn't want anything to do with that. Huh, how did he do it? Genius. Reports say that he stopped the bull last second before it charged at him. I say there's a thing in his head and he wasn't sure what was up. That's my vote. Poor thing. And then next, as you could have guessed, came the people. 25 people were tested with this mind control device by electronically controlling the brain. He believes armies could be controlled down the road. And until his death in 2011, he was upset. Yeah, he was upset he wasn't cited as often in terms of mind control projects in recent studies. Like, guy who mind control animals in the 1900s. Yeah, we're trying not to do that anymore. Maybe. Thanks. Number 6. Ilya Ivanov. In the late 1800s, another old weird experiment with animals was underway. Here we go. Soviet biologists, they actually got permission from the country to breed hybrid ape humans. Yep. What did you get up to last summer? Oh, let me tell you, my friends. Horrible. Who does this? This is crazy. Who thinks of this? They grafted an ovary into a chimp and the goal was to fertilize Nora, the chimp, with human DNA. Nightmare. So they inseminated a group of chimps. None of them got pregnant, obviously, so instead they tried to flip the project around. This time they had a human inseminated with the DNA of chimps. The volunteer number was obviously low. Luckily, nothing actually happened. This would have been an absolute train wreck. Before the project went underway, he was sent to Kazakhstan, and he thankfully didn't get up to any more science projects at that point. No mixed in DNAs, nothing's going around. We're good. We dodged that bullet, but we got close. Number 5. William Buckland. Late 1700s, contemporary of Charles Darwin himself. Yeah, William Buckland, historically, he made some Jurassic waves. He was the first man to write a description of a fossilized dinosaur. He's into weird stuff, I guess. He's unfortunately also known for weird stuff more than, the dino discovery stuff. William Buckland would eat some strange dishes, all in the name of, science and discovering new things with DNA. They were bored, I guess. He roasted hedgehogs, ostriches, panthers, bats. He ate everything. Like, I get it, it was the late 1700s, but eating these animals as often as he did, plus his brains, now we gotta ask some questions. What's going on? What's the end game here, my guy? One of the most bizarre things that he studied up close and personal was the heart of King Louis XIV. Yeah, the way these scientists would handle tasks like old school testing, not ideal. Actually quite gross. Number 4, Francis Crick. Here we go. Before we get really, really dark here with the science and health studies and stuff, we need to mention aliens. You heard me. Tinfoil's on already. We're good. In the early 1900s, Francis Crick, the guy who discovered DNA alongside James Watson, two brilliant minds, dare I say life-changing discoveries, they also believed in directed transpermia, meaning that humans were put on this planet by aliens. Yeah, like extraterrestrials, like actual, aliens, like another species planted us here on purpose, like a science project. Yeah, scientists believe that they are a science project. Some of his methods, conversations to patients, were obviously quite sketchy with these beliefs in order. Hey, let's talk about DNA. I'm brilliant. Also, did you know aliens left you here? Great, have a great day. Here's your bill. It's a lot of money. It's really old. Number 3, John Bodkin Adams. He was once a general practitioner in the British community in Essex, and most of his patients were unfortunately elderly. And he treated said elderly patients with care. Now, there's obviously more. It gets dark. From 1946 to 1956, John had around 160 patients that all suspiciously died, and out of those 160, 132 of them just happened to leave valuables over for him. Yeah, he ended up dying a very rich man. What are the odds? Must have been some great care he was providing, eh? Not fishy at all. Of course, the wills were later found out to be fraudulent because, well, as per this list, it was the worst of the worst. And the worst part of all this, John was acquitted after everything. Yeah, his trial established that the doctrine of double effect, which is where a doctor giving treatment with the aim of relieving pain, may lawfully, as an unintentional result, shorten their life. So they're like, oh, it sometimes happens, so we can't punish him. Yeah, no, look at the numbers here. So out of the dozens of cases that ended horribly, Adams was only charged for 2. And he wasn't even convicted of their deaths even. He was just guilty of forging prescriptions and falsifying medical forms. He even reopened his practice. Yeah, although he was fined. He was fined only £2,000. The general public knew he had taken the lives of at least 8 people, so he didn't do much after that. But like I said, he ended up passing away rich at the age of 84. Number 2, Morris Bolber. He was once part of the Philadelphia poison ring, which, yep, already you're like, oh, number 2, we're already here. Here we go. Yeah, that was a real thing. How horrible does that sound? The Philadelphia poison ring. Okay, it was led by these two Italian cousins. It was led by Paul and Herman Petrillo. This was back in the 1930s. And these two brothers, these two bros, they were perfect for each other in a horrible, dark, disgusting way. Harold was the arson who knew how to make counterfeit money, and Paul ran an insurance scam out of the back of his tailor business. So already this awful duo exists, and then in comes Morris Bolber, this Jewish Russian immigrant who believed in something called La Fatura, this magical practice that Italians from South Philadelphia believed in at the time. So bad, and then in comes crazy science, medical magic, just to make it better. Yeah, just add some spirit fingers into this horribleness. So Dr. Bolber would come in and give potions to patients, specifically patients from these cousins that they issued insurance policies from without medical exams. So they got this Dr. Bolber to then poison them with arsenic. The reason they had this scheme was because their insurance policies paid out the gang rather than the now widowed wives. How sad is that? This kicked off around 1931 and roughly 50 people bit the bullet before he was thankfully arrested in 1939. And yes, he turned the evidence over so those two cousins were also equally found guilty. Yeah, everyone's sentenced to death here. And finally, number 1, Dr. Satan. There's a fun little nickname, Dr. Satan. Yeah, let's talk about this guy. Marcel Petiot. It all started when he was young, as most of these do. He would get expelled from school, he had trouble with other students, and his first adult crime, was mail fraud. Reminder, this was the early 1900s. Marcel was actually found to be mentally unfit to stand on trial after he was arrested, so later he joined the army. Yeah, that's the real sentence. That's the order that things happen in. The army later discharged him after he was caught stealing blankets, and come 1921 he decided to get a degree. Yeah, he began practicing in France, and at the same time in 1926 he became the mayor. Yeah, we have a medical doctor and mayor all at the same time in the early 1900s. This sounds like a Tim Burton movie already. I'm already nervous. The guy loses his spot as a mayor because he stole power from the city. Yeah, he stole power from the city, like a real villain, right? And in 1933 his crimes became historically horrible. YouTube doesn't like us talking about Hitler and the Yazis, but we'll rhyme them, you know, we'll outrhyme the algorithm. This is history, we gotta talk about it. Marcel would talk to Jewish residents while World War II was unfolding, and he would lie. He would say that he's gonna assist them by injecting them with what he said was medicine, but after they'd passed away he would steal all their belongings and dispose of their bodies in the basement. It's horrible. It's perhaps one of the worst things I've ever heard of. Come 1943 he was thankfully arrested, and after the liberation of Paris he was found guilty for killing over 60 people. And in 1946 he finally met his fate via the guillotine.
In our number 10 spot we have mice with human butts. Okay, so not exactly human butts per se, but with human anal sphincters, which if you don't know what that is, don't worry, I didn't either, I had to look it up. An anal sphincter is a group of muscles at the end of the rectum that surrounds the anus and controls the release of stool, aka poop. So anyways, in 2011, scientists were able to create a human-mouse hybrid by bioengineering human anal sphincters out of human nerves and muscles and surgically transplanting them onto their rear ends. Yep, sounds horrifying, but this was in fact an experiment that was done with the hope that, if proven successful, the scientists can help humans by making replacement anal sphincters for them. They were quite happy with their results, as the mice seemed to take well to them as they fused with the rest of the flesh. They even found that the mice could relax and contract them like their own natural sphincters. Wild. Coming up at our number 9 spot, we have the mouse with the ear. In 1997, a team of Harvard and MIT scientists got together to perform an experiment where they put a scaffolding in the shape of a human ear inside a mouse. It was made of biodegradable materials, and so eventually the scaffolding was absorbed into the mouse's body, making a biological ear of flesh and cartilage. This could be removed and actually surgically transplanted onto a human. Whoa, this is truly mind-blowing to me. If this project continued, it could mean great things for plastic surgeons everywhere whom are known to have a hard time reconstructing ears. But of course, this was a very expensive project, so it hasn't been able to continue. I hope the mouse with the ear got to live a long life. On our number 8 spot, we have mice with human brains. This is one of those experiments that makes you wonder what the world will look like in 20 years. This is an experiment that was done in 2014 where mice were given millions of of human brain cells. Each mouse in the experiment had about 12 million human cells to be exact, and in the experiment the researchers noticed that the human cells tended to take over the mouse brain cells. Move over, we're more powerful than you. The experiment was quite the success, with the scientists discovering that these mice showed that their memory was 4 times stronger than a regular mouse's. Unfortunately though, they had to go through some pretty inhumane practices to learn this fact, including playing really loud music and attacking the mice with an electrical shocking tool. They were then able to measure how the mice reacted the next time they heard the sound. Gosh, memory is such a crazy thing. To think that sound, smell, taste, sight, touch can all cause pain if there's a specific memory attached to them is honestly wild. In today's 7th spot, we have monkeys with human cells. Okay, so you're probably thinking, isn't this possibly a dangerous experiment as humans and monkeys are already super close to each other in many ways? Well, in 2007, Yale University decided to take the risk and find out. They put human neural stem cells into 5 different monkeys to analyze how it would affect Parkinson's disease. The experiment proved to be quite successful, as the monkeys who suffered with the disease all could eat and walk and move way better than they could before. They also observed that the monkeys had no tumors or tremors and no bad side effects. The experiment was quite ethically controversial, even though it was a success, and so whether it continues to be done with monkeys in the future is unclear. In our number 6 spot, we have the human chimpanzee. Another risky experiment, but one that was done when there wasn't a very high concern for human ethics, so aka a while ago. Apparently in 1967, a group of Chinese scientists were successful in impregnating a chimpanzee with human sperm. 2 Chinese scientists have claimed this, but it hasn't been officially confirmed to be true. But from what they have said, they were successful with their experiment, and the chimpanzee was 3 months pregnant, only to be killed in a horrific attack on the lab, and all of their work was destroyed. It is said that this was due to the Cultural Revolution at the time. In any case, scientists have claimed to want to try this experiment again in the 80s, but nothing came of it. Probably for the best, as it has also been said that they plan to use this human-chimpanzee hybrid to drive carts and herd sheep and also send it out to space. This is purely on the basis of it having a human brain, of course. But yeah, maybe ethically not a good reason for creating these creatures. In our number 5 spot today, we have the human mouse. In a series of experiments in 2010, scientists at the Salk Institute were able to create a mouse with almost an entirely human liver. Whoa. In the past, experiments like this were done on chimpanzees, and there was a lot of controversy over this, as there was much speculation in regards to the ethics of this experiment. So the researchers opted for mice to be safe. Honestly, you would think that there would be controversy over all animals, but anyways, the project was supposed to study diseases such as hepatitis B and C and malaria. After injecting the mice with the illnesses, the researchers tried testing for a cure. There's been many breakthroughs so far, and so scientists continue to be hopeful with these experiments. In our number 4 spot today, we have the human pig. An experiment was done in the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota to try and examine how human cells would interact with pig cells if they were to come in contact with each other. Through concocting this experiment, the clinic was able to successfully produce a pig with human cells. Yes, it was still a pig seemingly on the outside, but on the inside, half of its cells were human. They injected human cells into pig fetuses, and voila! A human-pig hybrid. Through doing this experiment, they noticed that the pig cells stayed to one side of the body, while the human cells stayed to the other side. But every so often, some of the cells would interact and fuse together to make a brand new DNA, a human-pig DNA. Pretty cool. It would be awesome if they would allow these animals to grow so that they can study them to see if they end up being able to do any humanly functions over time, but as such, that is not the case so far. In our number 3 spot today, we have human animal milk. Scientists from Russia and Belarus successfully genetically modified goats to produce human breast milk. Since then, scientists from all over have been trying to make the milk more human. As much as the Russian and Belarusian scientists tried, they only managed to make the milk 60% human with a specific enzyme, lysine, and the protein lactoferrin being apparent. They are usually found in human milk. Apparently, a Chinese team made a whole herd of cattle, that's 300 cattle, that produced human milk. The goal is to make human breast milk more available in stores for mothers that can't breastfeed and have to resort to formula. There's talk of the same company wanting to create a human milk cheese, and that is where I draw the line. What is the purpose of this? Just no. In our number 2 spot today, we have human organs. There is a scientist named Hiromitsu Nagauchi who was given a $1.4 million grant from the US Army to work on developing human-animal hybrids with the purpose to create a farm of animals that can be harvested for human hearts and lungs. Of course, one of the biggest reasons for these types of experiments is to see if we can find a way to solve the human organ shortage that is needed for transplants around the world. The idea of creating a farm to harvest these organs would be revolutionary for humans and would give a patient a higher likelihood of getting one and surviving. So an incredible cause, even though the idea of doing it, well, I'm glad I don't have that job. In 2017, Hiromitsu and his team created 186 pig-human hybrids that unfortunately was only allowed to develop for 28 days before they were destroyed. Apparently, his team is currently working on a sheep-human hybrid. They have yet to have complete success, but they feel that they are getting closer and closer. Finally, coming up in our number 1 spot today, we have the Rabbit Man. Yes, you heard that correctly. A man that is a rabbit. I was gonna say, something out of a nightmare, but honestly, nah, a pig man would be way more terrifying. In Shanghai in 2003, a team of scientists successfully infused human cells in rabbit eggs in a laboratory dish, creating an embryo of a new creature that was, yes, you guessed it, half rabbit, half human. Apparently, the United States scientists have been trying to perform this experiment for quite some time, but never managed to fully pull it off as none ever survived. In this experiment, the majority of the DNA in the creatures was human, and just a small amount of them was rabbit. Apparently, they never allowed the world to see this creature, as after a few days of growth, they decided to destroy it and harvest it for stem cells. Damn. Why would they go through all of that trouble only to destroy it? We could have possibly had our first talking animal. Oh, humans.